Hello YouTubers, TN Artist here, Brett Tadlock. Just wanted to give you a quick voiceover for this tutorial that we've got going on here. So what I'm starting out is the drawing of an eagle. And the way I always start my drawings is to first start out with the rough shape, kind of what I want to do with the head and so forth here. So in this case I'm doing an eagle head. So what I started out with was just kind of rough shaping with the direction of the skull, maybe the neck, and then the torso, the upper chest. So I take out the old pencil tool and start working on that and drawing out the rough shapes, and then from there I start adding in a few more details to kind of get an idea for it. So this is kind of where he wants to see. Now right here I could make this an eagle, I could make it a parrot, I could make it just about anything that I wanted. So I was going with an eagle, obviously. Had that in mind. So you'll see me start refining it out and doing it here. But the main thing to remember is when you're doing this, be real loose with this. Since you're using a program like Artrage, which I absolutely love, you can start out with a layer. Sometimes I'll do this in blue pencil, and then I'll do another layer and put black pencil on top of that to kind of go it in. That was a trick I learned in school to help you kind of see the differences and refine it. And you can keep doing that. I've done that before where I use multiple pencils to kind of refine and then refine, and then I'll use, when I finally get to the point I want, that's when I'll ink over it if I'm going to do an ink. But this I was just painting, so honestly for paintings I tend to just get the general idea and some of the lighting in place first, and then from there I'll start painting it out. I don't like to draw it in too much when I'm painting it, because then it kind of takes the pleasure of painting it away from me. But here I want to just put in the shapes of the lights and the darks and get a good feel for that and make sure everything is kind of reading correctly. And then from there I'll start painting it in. So that's what I'm doing right here. You'll notice I spent a little bit more time on the eye itself right there. One of the reasons I do that when I'm drawing and painting is because I heard that old saying a long time ago that the eye is the window to the soul, and I really took that to heart. So I want to make sure that I really get the layout for where that's going to be correct from the beginning, and start with there. So here I am just putting in some more shading and trying to make sure that I get a good feel for it. This is actually about the most that I'll do for a drawing of a picture, and then from there I'll start painting it. So what I'm doing right now is removing some of my big marks and then kind of filling back in the details, if you will, to kind of give me a good idea of the feather flow. Eagle feathers are interesting on the top for a bald eagle, and I'm sure it's the same for other birds. I just never really paid that much attention. It's a little bit more noticeable for eagles, but it really flowed. The top of their feathers flow a lot like fur, and so I just was kind of drawing it out and had that in mind from there. So here I am starting to paint in some of the shadow colors for the fur, and using kind of a dull yellow, if you will, to kind of go in there. And then from there I'm going to start adding some browns and some reds and then eventually you'll see that I have blues in all the way. One thing that I find is helpful when I'm painting is trying to start with a more neutral mid-tone, if you will, for what I'm wanting to do. So obviously the bald eagle's feathers, the white feathers, they're not really white, they're just lighter. And one of the things I didn't do here that you'll see I'll go and correct here in a little bit, a lot of times I start with the background and get rid of the white to begin with, but honestly I was just kind of getting into it and was enjoying the drawing, so I didn't really throw in the background first. But usually I'll do that so that way I can make sure that my midtones truly are midtones, and kind of see a better idea of color values and so forth where I'm at. So again here, just throwing in color on the beak, throwing in color on the feathers and the eye, and trying to get a good idea of the basic shapes of the main color points and giving them outlines and get an idea. Not overly concerned with details right now, kind of like with when I'm doing the drawing. I just start obliterating the drawing because in my mind's eye I keep the drawing there, so I don't have to keep going back to it and depend on it, because what will happen is I'll start depending on that alone instead of actually enjoying the painting process and start sculpting the paint and the light the way I need it. So that's why I'm not overly concerned with the drawing itself, because I've got it in my head. And most of the time when I'm working in Artrage, I tend to work on one layer, as you can see right here, just the same as I would as if I was working on canvas or paper or something like that. So I guess once a traditional artist, always a traditional artist. I don't know. So here I am starting to throw in some of the background colors. I know I want to do a bit of a mottled look to it to give it kind of the illusion of depth in the background, but I really wanted to give it a nice dark color, so that way it could really stand out. One thing to let you know, you'll see here in a moment, and you probably saw some of the pencil drawing, the highlight of the bird is on the left side, on what we're viewing as would be our left looking at the screen. So to make that really stand out more, you want to have the darker side be on where the highlights are, which can sound kind of counterintuitive. So for example, the light's coming in from the left, the lighter side of the bird will be on the left, so I need to have the brighter side on the right for the background, so that way the highlights stick out more on the left. And it's just that contrast of lights and darks. That's what makes a painting work, is really, if you think about it, when you're doing a painting, all you're doing is creating lights and darks that trick the eye into seeing something. And so that's what I'm doing right here. I'm just trying to start sculpting that in, and see, I can already tell as I laid in some of the darker colors, I can tell that my lighter blue mid-tone that I had there really wasn't dark enough, and so I needed to push it a step down and could use that more towards the light color. And that's why really one of the things, like I said, I broke kind of a rule here when I was doing this, because I just kind of got into the drawing of it, was to do your background color first and then put your main subject on top of that, because it gives you a good idea of where you're really at with everything. So here I'm getting ready to do the modeling, and I know it'll look kind of weird the way I'm throwing it in here with the colors and everything else, because it's like, what are you doing there? But you'll see where it really starts to play out for the colors and really starts to combine. All I'm using here is the palette knife at its normal default setting. Like I said before, I don't tend to play around with the settings overly too much, because I want to just go with what the basics are, because that way, A, I find they work for me. B, if anybody's wanting to try this, I don't want them to get buried down in the settings, because a lot of people look for, well, if I could just get that tool to be the exact same as that person's, then my artwork's going to look like theirs. Well, no, it's not. Okay, you've got to just play around with what works for you, and don't really pay attention to the settings of the tools, because there never is going to be that perfect brush. There never is going to be that perfect setting. And the same thing goes for real world stuff. Like if you're working with the filbert brush or a flat brush or a paint roller, or you're working with clay or whatever, it's not the materials that make the creativity, it's you. So you really don't need to pay attention to what the different settings are. Okay, just play around with the paint, play around with the materials, and get comfortable with them. And really, that's all I'm doing right here. I'm just playing around with colors. I throw colors up on here, I smear them around and see if I like them. It's the exact same thing I do on canvas. I just throw it on there, I get an idea of kind of what I want, and experience makes you not have to experiment as much, but just put the colors on there, smear it. The great thing about digital artwork versus traditional artwork, if I don't like something, I can always hit undo, or I can just throw it on there, and I'm not costing myself anything but time, and I'm not really costing myself that, because I'm gaining more experience. So have fun. One of the greatest things I've loved about digital artwork since I first started messing around with it was just the ability to play, just the ability to have fun with it. There are some people out there that create amazing, stunning results, and if you watch them, like their speed paintings and stuff, it looks like total junk when they're first doing it, because they're just playing. They're playing with it. They have an idea, a concept in their mind, but they're relaxed enough to play around with the lights, play around with the darks, play around with the shapes. And if they don't like it, they undo it, or they just go ahead and smear over top of it. So give yourself that same license. Play around, have fun, and just really relax and create. Focus on that part. So anyway, off my soapbox. So again, right here, trying to bring in the darks and the lights and the layouts of the background, and then the getting rid of the rest of the pure white that's on the canvas by kind of putting in some of the bird's body and so forth. So And again, just starting to smear colors together to blend it. If I was using traditional brushes and acrylics and oils, this is where I would probably just take dry brush in the different colors, and with probably usually tend to use a filbert, and just start drying it in there and blending them all around and feathering them in and out to make the make it look the way I want it to. So that's what I'm doing right here. Just throwing in more colors, throwing more highlights, pushing the darks, pushing the contrast. One thing right here, you notice how I just put the little bit of an overlap of the white feather sticking on the dark blue there on the left. It's over here on the dark. You'll see where there's like the little bumps sticking out. That's really important because it pushes that background blue into the background so that the bird doesn't look like it's a cutout. And you always want to give it some sort of overlap with the dark because it pulls it forward from that dark. Okay, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. If it doesn't, then leave me a comment below and I'll definitely try to clarify. But you always want to have those contrasts of the lights and darks and push it and pull it. So I'm just, again trying to go in and define the lights and the shadows. Just again smearing in darks, throwing them down the colors. There's a section you'll see here coming up in just a little bit where I was kind of honestly trying to figure out if I wanted to go with this looser style, impressionistic style that I was doing, or if I wanted to maybe add some pen and ink and go a little bit more line drawing and illustration side. So I lay that in there again, just playing around and see if I like it or not, and then I immediately get rid of it because I realized that is not what I want. So just trying to again lay it in, blend the color, lay it in, blend the color, keep pushing and pulling. Right here it is. That's where I was talking about with trying to play around if I wanted to do that, and immediately changed my mind. So I went right back to start doing what I was doing because it was working. And but again, play with what you got, especially if you're doing digital stuff like Artrage, Photoshop. You give yourself that freedom to push it and pull it and see where it's going to lead you. Let the colors and the paint direct you sometimes. Give it that opportunity to do so. So again, the marker tool that I'm using right here, I really like the way that looks for some of the laying in of the colors. And so you'll see me start using it here more to put in some of the ones, because I really like when you put it down on there, it gives it a nice painterly feel over top of the oil. And then I'll go back and smear it around with the palette knife. And I really liked it. Now the one thing I had concern about was I was worried it was going to get too loose and would start losing definition and so forth. So I did kind of have to control myself a little bit there and make it go. But you'll see where I go back and take the oil brush and start giving it crisper details that really kind of, again, play the contrast. If it's not just lights and darks, but it's also textures. Is it loose? Is it tight? Is it where does the light fall? How does it fall? Is it crisp? Is it out of focus slightly? That's what's going to push and pull your painting to give it those effects that you want and make it look the way that you want. So that's what you see me doing here. I'm just still playing around with it and trying to, there is a point though you will find, and I find in mine, that I have to try to keep from getting caught up overly. You overwork it, and I found myself kind of starting to run down that path, and it started. I wanted to give it a little bit more detail. What you see right here is kind of what I'm doing with the line work that I'm then smearing back out. I wanted to give it just a little bit of focus, but not so much that it just overworked it. So that's what I'm doing right here, is just playing around with some of the darks and giving a little bit of crisp look to the edges. And here's where I start adding in some of the highlights to push and pull. And you'll see some of the line work up on the top that I do around the eye and everything else. Again, trying to give it some focus, give it some crispness, give it some movement, but at the same time, not overdo it. So starting to come up on the end of the video here, and I'm just going to keep pushing and pull this. I hope you've enjoyed this. I would love to hear some feedback from you, that these videos and tutorials are helping. If there's something specific you would like painted, let me know that. Send me a comment below, or touch base with me on Facebook and say, hey, I need help with this, or what about, how would you do that? More than happy to do it. More than happy to jump in there. I really want this to become a community of where you can get help with artwork and learn to do it. So I appreciate it. Hope you'll comment and subscribe, and look me up on Facebook. It's facebook.com/the TN Artist, and you can also find me on my website, which is probably easier, tnartist.me. So I appreciate it. Appreciate your time, and I hope you've really enjoyed this. I know I enjoyed painting it, and I look forward to touching base with more of you. So let's connect, and have a great rest of the day. I'm going to be signing this here in just a second, and then I'll return you to your regularly scheduled program. So thanks again for stopping by and watching, and I hope you really enjoyed it. Thanks.